name's Molly Powers-Tora, and I'm the team leader for ocean literacy at the Pacific Community based here in Suva, Fiji. The Pacific Community, or SPC, is a regional organization, sort of like a mini UN for the Pacific, and we do a lot of technical work, science, and capacity building across our 26 member states in the Pacific. Our team here is the Ocean Science team, and one of the projects we've been working on for quite a few years is the Climate and Ocean Support Program in the Pacific, or COSPAC. It's an Australian-funded initiative. And COSPAC really aims to build Pacific capacity to understand and apply ocean science as well as climate science to support decision-making and sustainable development in the Pacific. So the project, we have 14 tide gauges and sea level monitoring stations that are based around the region. And we've also, apart from just collecting that data, that really critical data, we work to ensure that national meteorological services can access and understand that data. And then the next level down is to ensure that Met services are communicating that information in the form of warnings and other important alerts to communities and other sectors that can make use of that information. For example, tourism, the maritime sector, communities that have that are reliant on coral reefs, NGOs, and others. So the way that we've done this is through, we have one tool called the Ocean Portal. It was developed and co-designed really with Met Services and stakeholders over more than 8 years to ensure, and one of the things we discovered when we were doing that design work was that it's very important to not focus as much on just raw data and access to raw data, but actually data tools and maps and graphs and easily interpretable downstream products. So the Ocean Portal is also a very low bandwidth, so it's easily accessible across the region, our region which has not very reliable internet access. In addition to building this portal, and going hand in hand with building the portal has been capacity building with National Met Services on how to use it. So, we can't just deliver a tool, we have to train people on how to use the tool. And the reason why this is so important to do across Met Services in the Pacific is that while traditionally many Met Services have just been observation stations, and they largely look after atmospheric observations. So looking out to the ocean and doing ocean forecasting has not been part of their routine work. So we're recognizing that we are a region that's 99% ocean, 98% ocean, and where almost 90% of Pacific Islanders live within 10 kilometers of the coast. We realize that this is a really important capacity to build within our national Met Services and for that last mile outreach to communities for them to really understand what's at risk. As an example of what's at risk, the tropical cyclone Winston, which hit Fiji in 2016, was a Category 5 cyclone and one of the largest cyclones ever to come across the Pacific. And there were 44 casualties in Fiji as a result of tropical cyclone Winston. 16 of those casualties were directly attributable to people who drowned in coastal inundation and in major flooding events. But a total of 30 out of 44 could be indirectly attributed to coastal flooding because those people had sheltered in areas that were prone to storm surge and storm tide, and they had to shelter in a different location and move in the middle, in the height of the storm. And then they expose themselves to other dangers. So it just drives home how important it is to get these messages out to communities of the dangers potentially of the ocean and ocean monitoring and ocean understanding and ocean literacy. So we've conducted training in 11 Pacific Island countries since 2015. And some of the direct results of that include the fact that now 7 Pacific Island Met Services are producing monthly ocean outlooks. And these contain information about coral reef bleaching alerts, chlorophyll concentrations, as well as sea surface temperatures, sea level, and other important parameters and ocean variables that are key for these different sectors. And importantly, it's helped to build the relationship between the Met Services in these countries and those stakeholders so that there's an ongoing feedback loop, and the Met Services can understand what people are grasping and what they need some additional help with, and what other information they might need to provide, or even ocean monitoring systems they might need to put in place. And that feedback loop is really critical because we see around the world very often we create lots of data. There's so much data available, but is that data being used? Is the data understood? Can it be applied to solve the problems that we're facing in our countries? And that's a very different set of questions. So I can tell you one story about sort of a success story that we've seen in our region, and that's in the Solomon Islands. So in 2015, we conducted the national workshop with Solomon Islands Met Service and with their stakeholders. There was a lot of ocean literacy, a lot of capacity building. We started with very basic kind of ocean information, introduction to oceanography, and then also built up the capacity of the Met Services and those who are a little bit more technically savvy to better understand how they might be able to do forecasting and ocean interpretation and accessing and navigating the ocean portal. The result of that workshop was that the director of Met Services said, I need an oceanographer. He applied to Cabinet to be able to get access to funds to establish a new position. And I believe it was 2018 or early 2019, the first oceanographer in any Met Service in the Pacific was hired in the Solomon Islands. His name is Danny Shedrat. And Danny is, since we've done a lot of one-on-one training with him here in our team, we brought him over for an attachment, helped him to produce Solomon Islands monthly ocean outlook, and even brought him to Ocean Obs 19, where he presented on created a poster and presented on some of the outcomes of the work he's been doing for the maritime sector and maritime safety in the Solomon Islands. As a follow-up, this year in 2020, Solomon Islands Met Service worked with the Solomon Islands Maritime Safety Authority and is able to conduct a further stakeholder engagement to better understand their needs, and that was largely driven by Danny and his work. So it's not just about our agency and the data that we're able to collect, or even the aid program. It's really about building capacity in these individual countries in their Met Services to be able to continue the work and really own it and engage with stakeholders, because they're the ones sitting at the front lines, and they're the ones who are best able and best know the local situations and local players, and are able to really get to that last mile of messaging around ocean literacy, ocean hazards, and the importance of knowing your ocean.